Hello and welcome to St James in the City Church here in the city centre of Liverpool for Faith Matters, where we're going to meet Debs Davies, who's the worship pastor, and we're going to talk about all things worship. Hello and welcome to Faith Matters with me, Keith Hitchman. Here we are at St James in the City Church in the city centre of Liverpool with Debs Davies, who is the worship pastor. Thank you for having us here today.
Yeah, no problem.
We're going to talk to you, as the worship pastor, we're going to talk to you about worship today. You're a young 20-something, young lady.
Yes.
It's a very strange occupation to many of our viewers who are watching this. How did you get to be doing this?
Well, I suppose a few people will be wondering what is a worship pastor in the first place.
Yeah.
So I should probably say what I do and then say why it's strange.
Okay.
So I lead the worship team at St James, so a band of musicians, and effectively, my job is to develop the music for Sunday services, our worship here, and to make it the best that it can be, and to get the team really just all on the same page and having like the best community experience as a church. But also my role kind of releases me to work with the local area. So I work in Toxteth. I run a Toxteth worship network, which invites churches of many denominations to come together. So rather than journeying alone, we can meet termly, we can meet for songwriting retreats, we can meet to pray, we can meet to train together, and it just creates a wider sense of community. So that's my job, is to build team here and create community.
We're here, we've got lots of sort of music stands and stuff and mics. What kind of instruments are here?
What kind of instruments? Well, we've got a keyboard there.
Yeah.
We've got some cons. This fake table is a piece of percussion, and we have guitars and bass and general pop rock setup.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So how did you get to be doing this?
Well, I grew up in church, and as a musical person from a musical family, I gravitated to the worship team. And when I was a teenager, I started to lead worship, which was to sing and kind of lead the songs. I was in a band and gigged a lot through uni. Did weddings and YouTube and all that usual thing now. Right. But I also studied theology and philosophy, and kind of did them hand in hand. And then eventually, when we're going to talk about what worship is. Yeah. But for me, it's putting God first and loving Him above all else. And there was a moment in my life when other things were clouding my relationship with God and my view of Him. And when I put them to one side, for me, worship and worship ministry was what I fell back on and what became my first love. So, I applied for a training course in London and kind of left home for the first time and went and discovered that you could actually do worship ministry, sing songs for church full-time kind of, and get supported doing that.
And that course was at Holy Trinity Brompton,
yes.
Also known as HTB, probably most known in the centre of London. Very famous church, behind the Alpha course, and it has released a lot of worship ministry. So you went down there from the girl from the north, down to study there. It was a good experience. A
brilliant experience, yes. But serving a church that was on a different scale to my local church. Kind of with an international reach, but just being in London is a culture shock and a completely different environment. So for me, it was just a great kind of stretching, challenging experience. And just, Worship Central is the organisation that trained me. And that was just such a warm environment. And they really have a heart for seeing the local church equipped.
And then you came back up here to Liverpool, to St James in the City, where we are now.
Yeah.
Where you're trying to create a church here, really. I mean, we've had you in before, talk about what you, you know, some time ago, actually, a year or two ago, as a church. But you're trying to do something for young people, really, aren't you?
Yes. Yeah. We well, the vision of the church originally was that it's a resourcing church, so it doesn't just kind of, you know, get as big as it possibly can, and kind of succeed that way. It's really just to give away as much as possible, and just kind of try to be as much of a blessing to the local church. So so we're always wanting to release people, and part of that is me going to a youth group that meets in Toxteth, and on Tuesday evenings we gather for band practice. And so there's now a team of young people from different churches, not all serving their worship teams originally, but you know, through doing the youth band they can I think the churches realise, gosh, we've got really talented young people who can bless us on Sundays. So now they're serving their churches, and we still meet to rehearse together.
Okay, we're going to come to that term. You know, we have a wide range of viewers for faith matters. You know, some from faith backgrounds, some from not. But you know, some people might not know what worship is. You know, what is worship? I mean, you've got a theology degree. You know, give us some kind of theological answer and a personal answer. And you began to do that. But
yes. Well, to give a really basic definition, our word worship in English is derived from the word to ascribe worth to something. So it's like worthship, and something that is worth our adoration and our energy and our time. And so, in a very broad sense, what we're doing in worship is we're saying, this is the thing, this is the person that I attribute the most worth to in my life. And for Christians, that person is God, Father, Son and Spirit, and he is the one who is most worth our praise, and that's why we gather. And that's but it's also, worship isn't just something we kind of do outwardly on a Sunday. It's not just meeting together, it's not just singing songs. For Christians it's a heart response, and it's something that impacts our day-to-day lives and everything we think and do and say. So
okay, we all worship something, don't we? As human beings. Is that? I mean, I've heard that said before. Is that true of people?
I think it's true to a point. I think if you ask the average person what worship is, they might picture someone bowing down to something, or throwing incense, or going through a ritual. And so people would say, well, I don't worship things in my life because I'm not doing that on a daily basis. I think my understanding of worship is far removed from that, and I think when it's something internal as well as external, it's very much possible to worship other things. I think for me personally, if you ask me what I worship, I would say God, I would say Christ, Jesus. But sometimes in life I have to ask myself, who am I really worshipping? Because sometimes it's not what we think. Sometimes, I would say when I'm daydreaming, when my mind drifts off, that thing that I think about most, the thing that I pour most of my time, of my day into, just the person that I talk to the most, they are the person that I'm ascribing the most worth to. They're the person that I'm inwardly worshipping. So for me, everyone's got that one thing that takes priority in their life. It might be their work, it might be their spouse or their children or whatever.
Or themselves.
Some people we all think about ourselves a lot.
So do you think people can worship themselves?
Self-idolatry?
Yeah.
Sometimes I think we all, it's not just the Christian point of view, but to think about yourself so much is unhelpful and unhealthy, I think. I think, one thing that Christian worship does is teaches you to love your neighbour. The greatest commandment being to love God with all your heart, mind, soul and strength. And the second greatest, to love your neighbour as yourself. And I think it wasn't just because that's the done thing. It was God saying, I can help you. I can help you to live in freedom. I think it's for me, one of the best things about worshipping on Sundays is it takes my eyes off myself. I can see the people around me. I see God, and I'm just taught for my heart to pour out to another rather than just myself.
Yeah, I've heard it said that, you know, you've just talked about the commandments, that Jesus' great commandments to love God, love your neighbour as yourself, so in that kind of order.
Yes.
I've heard it said that the world, if you like, or the opposite of that, is that what we, you know, our human nature, or perhaps our sinful nature, would go for it the other way around. So we love ourselves first, then we might love our neighbour, whoever they might be, the person next to us, and then God's some kind of an afterthought.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a sort of correct assessment of the situation?
No, I understand where that point of view comes from, you know, and the idea that, you know, we should always be able to love ourselves. We should always hold ourselves in high esteem. I think, I want that for people, and I think that that God wants that. But for me, in my experience in the Christian church, the idea is that loving God first above ourselves actually increases our understanding of our own worth. As we ascribe worth to God, as we give him praise and glory, we're able to see the reason that that he is who he is. As we understand more about God, we realise that he is love. God is love. And he's so worthy of our praise because he humbles himself and he loves us unconditionally. And so Jesus, it's impossible to talk about worship without talking about Jesus, who lays down his life for his friends and tries to bring us back into God's presence. And so why does God do that? Because he loves us and because we're worth it. And
Okay, well, a great note to end on for our first half. Join us on Faith Matters for our second part after the commercial break. Welcome back to Faith Matters with me, Keith Hitchman. We're here at St James's in the City Church in the city centre of Liverpool with Debs Davies, the worship pastor. We're talking about Debs and we're talking about worship and her role here. Debs, there are different types of worship, and you know, we're here at St James's with all your kind of, you know, your funky background and your guitars and keyboards and what's this thing called?
A cajon.
A cajon. And you know, it's not what a lot of people would expect of church. A lot of people expect you know, an organ and a choir and so on. You know, you lead this kind of worship here. You call it, is it pop music worship? How would you describe it?
It's called worship music, I guess, these days. Pop doesn't really mean anything, I don't think, so much these days, does it? But it's acoustic driven usually. Here we do a lot of acoustic. But yeah, soft rock, pop, if you want to give it a genre, but it's not everyone's experience. I think it's, from my generation, if you've grown up going to church, then this is normal, really normal, and actually a high church background might be more unfamiliar. But if you're from a high church background, then yes, this would be, again, maybe a bit confusing.
Although well, it's not actually that new, but the Anglican hymn book, the red one, do you know the one?
Yes.
I mean, that's got a lot of, you know, it's got some Matt Redman in it and some Martin Smith. And
yes, it's been updated.
That music seems to be getting into the more mainstream traditional church. I remember years ago when I was a youth worker, I was in a church that probably was one of the first in London to have this kind of worship, and I was doing some work with some kids from outside the church who were kind of into rap, I think, at the time. And I brought this lad in, and while the worship rehearsal was going on, thinking I was going to impress him, you know, his cap on backwards and stuff. And at the end of it, he said, I said, "What did you think?" And he said, "That was serious country and western." He said, "My mum would love that."
And, it's more music.
So it's kind of, you know, it's horses for courses. And so is this, would you say, is this guitar-led kind of worship music, is it better than organ-led, choir-led music? Or, you know, what's your take on that?
My answer would be no, absolutely not. It's not better, it's different. I personally love to worship in a high church setting. I love to go to the cathedral across the road and experience the choir, experience the organ, the liturgy, and some of the older hymns. For me, I really enter in through that, and I think the sense of God's awesomeness and scale, just worshipping in a different environment and worshipping to an older tradition. I think is really helpful for me. Reminds me how old my faith is, how many people have gone before. So I can kind of connect with God and find a way of worshipping Him in that environment as much equal to how I can engage here. I think it's just a different expression of worship, the contemporary expression. I think for me, I naturally do this because I can do it. I can't play the organ, and I really struggle to sing traditionally. So I really struggle to sing along to hymns. Sometimes I'm out of breath, I'm just not doing it. Whereas contemporary music is my style, my upbringing. So I naturally express myself this way. So it's better for me in terms of me actually leading other people because I can do it. But I think there are things in contemporary worship which echo some older practices in terms of repetition.
Absolutely. Like Gregorian, it's like Gregorian chant.
Sometimes, there are expressions of worship and styles of worship, but all of them can kind of malfunction or go wrong, or not be kind of used in the best way. So, and that can happen with contemporary music, and that can happen with more traditional forms. But I think when everything's done right, there's absolutely a place for it.
Yeah, I often think that when people say, they criticise contemporary worship and say it's so repetitious and there's no theology in it. And I think, well, if you ever listen to Gregorian chant, it is basically one statement about God being repeated.
Yeah, and the Psalms.
And the Psalms.
Give thanks to the Lord over and over again.
Over and over again.
Yeah.
And so it's actually, it's quite ancient.
Yes, and a great mode of worship, Taizé. I mean, that tradition, quite a not too old a tradition, but it kind of bridges, I find. I mean, I've led worship in traditional settings on guitar, singing Taizé material, and it appears that everyone can enter into that space. So it's great when worship leaders can come in and bridge a gap between the two. I think that's...
And you sing some older hymns. I mean, you've done some stuff for me that I've done in the city. I mean, I think we've had... How Great Thou Art or something, and Amazing Grace, which you kind of led in a contemporary style.
Yes, in terms of poetry, and if you kind of if you get a kick out of words, and you enter in through text and reading about God and expressing that, some of the hymns are the most beautiful way of doing it. And also I think it's helpful missionally. If we're singing songs here that no one's heard of, when they walk in from off the street, they might not recognise it. And I think at weddings and christenings, people are singing hymns, and if you can sing some, people recognise. You're basically saying, we welcome you here, we're not just doing our own thing. We want you to have a way in to join us. And personally, I just love singing the old hymns.
Yeah, I remember when I was a university chaplain, we had a guy, a Christian guy, who was connected with the chaplaincy, and he used to go into the bar on a Wednesday night, the university bar, when all the sports teams came in, and lead. He would basically take his guitar in and just entertain them. But what he did is he mixed in some worship songs with the sort of classics that he was singing. Right. And I remember one incredible night where he was singing "I Will Sing of Your Love Forever." Oh, yeah. And he had the whole rugby team, we'd all had a few jars singing this. And it was actually quite a strangely kind of holy moment. So I think worship does have a mission or function in that way, doesn't it? It does bridge the gap with cultures in that kind of way. Yeah. I want to talk about the contemporary worship industry, because there's been a lot of criticism around about from the church, in different wings of the church, and maybe possibly from outside, that maybe it's not so evident here in the UK, but certainly in the States, and we are impacted by the States here, that there's this industry that's sort of developed, which is a very commercial thing. What's your take on that? Are you part of that? Or?
I don't think I'm part of it.
You have released a CD though, haven't you?
We've released some children's worship.
Yeah,
so we're trying to break through the commercial
But you're not,
window.
You're not, photos not on there in glitzy kind of,
No, maybe in cartoon form.
Right,
Not yet. No, we're definitely not riding that wave too much here. I think, personally I don't have too much of a experience of the commercial worship industry, if you want to call it. I know that growing up, we had to buy worship CDs to listen to worship music, so we had to, pay for a CD.
They're quite expensive as well, aren't they?
Well, CDs were back then. It was, and you know, whether it was worship or, you know, pop music, it was...
I remember them being like 16 quid and stuff,
yeah.
you know.
Well, yeah, and it's such a niche, I mean, you know, even in the America, I guess it's still, yeah, a niche area. And but saying that, because nowadays you don't have to invest to hear worship music so much, like the cost to access material is a lot less. And that's just across the board in the music industry. You know, if I want to hear what a church in the States are doing this week, I can log on and hear it. Whereas in the past there was like a year turnover. Now it's like you can just hear what was done that Sunday and share material freely. So I think the trend's actually really good for worship. Okay,
and you know, some people would say that, you know, some of these worship leaders, you know, they're quite good looking, aren't they? Right. Guys as well as women.
Mm-hmm. Really? Yeah,
okay. You know,
yeah.
I mean, I've heard it said, you know, they're kind of like pop. Sometimes they look like pop stars, and they earn that kind of, well, not the massive money, but there's royalties now, isn't there, off songs, worship songs,
because they're good looking. I think, oh gosh, I don't know. I mean, I think if you're a worship leader, it doesn't matter what you look like. I mean, for me, some of the best, oh gosh, this is going to come out wrong, but some of the most accomplished worship leaders and anointed worship leaders, it's not because they're good looking. I mean, I don't think people are shallow enough to kind of have that impression. I think as with secular music, you need more than the appearance. You need a voice, you need soul, and people can see straight through that, whether it's secular music industry or the worship industry, I think.
What do you think of Mumford and Sons? Because, you know, I think more than one person in Mumford and Sons was a worship band. Yeah. Or one, you know, are they bridging some kind of gap there, or you got any?
I don't know. Simply, I don't know how many people who listen to Mumford and Sons know their origin story or anything like that. I mean, I can hear lyrical content inspired by scripture, but it's not like I put it on to worship to. There are some secular acts I'd put on to worship to who don't have a Christian background. Yeah,
I suppose it's whatever music you like. If you don't,
yeah, you've got to connect with it, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think long gone are the days when people are trying to kind of coerce people into listening to Christian music.
There's a great version of Amazing Grace by Mumford and Sons online.
I will check it out, Keith.
Yeah. Debs, it's been great to have you with us today.
Thank you.
It's been a fascinating conversation. Just wish you every blessing in what you're doing. Thanks for viewing, and join us next time for Faith Matters on Bay TV.